It's so exciting to know exactly where we're coming into in trash locations. It's really powerful stuff. It connects and always informs how we get into our settings, how to get into travel mechanisms, travels over pi, travels over calculations, travel calculations, setting and travel. So all we have to do is try to get into identification. What does that mean through tractions? How do I get into who we really are? Is what we are inside. Let me say that again. What we are is what we are inside of us, not what's outside, what's inside. There's nothing outside to see. Perception is inside. Perception is not outside. Perception is inside. So everything is inside. And what that means to us, okay, that formulates in all of the correlations, attractions, and all line connections to our system to see ourselves through modifications and travel, right? It gets us a better directions, okay? So in that formation line connections, John is going to set up the calculation lines at Q&A on Thursdays, right? To get everybody in such locations, just to get a better understanding of what's going on with them. They have questions about themselves, nothing else, okay? It's a referencing set location in your system. It is really understand how to communicate to yourself better, how to better yourself, okay? Not on a day-to-day basis, because tomorrow is never here, because it's always in this location, it's calculations, right? Because it's always here. So there's always to reiterate your words and turn them into frequency. You turn them into frequency. When you turn them into frequency, what does it create in settings location in your system? When you're speaking, an image. Okay, you guys are in higher levels of frequencies now. Now, when you get into the LCR, which is the set locations to the left, which is the core setting track line condition to the cortex line cerebro, is position line condition to your right. You got your left, you got your right hemisphere, and set location your core. The LCR is your connection to your system. Monitoring system location your heart. Okay, it's like an EG graph, right? Get into the energy line, graph calculations, all levels. Line signals, lines of high position and travel calculations. You see what you want to see through perception. You live what you want to live in your realities. That's on you. But everybody's going to see different. Same signals and high calculation. You have to be at the same frequency with each other to see the same thing through perception. But you have to understand your formation, your body is nothing but energy. Let me say it again. Your body is nothing but energy. Now, it's all formations of energy. How do I use it? How do I understand how to use my body? How do I understand the vibration? How do I understand the frequencies? And how do I understand the harmonics of communication? See? Snowball, right? See how vortex travel calculation of point centers? My computer is on point at all calculations, everything that I say. Everything I say, it hears everything of its awareness because everything around you is consciousness. So you have to recognize yourself first of consciousness. Your body is an energy and it formulates through reactions. Everything that you say, it reacts. Okay? So that's the connections where you have to get into the mind of navigation first. That's the process. And once you get into that, you come into the heart through time. Heart is a specification how to understand your alignments of time through your reactor. That's what your heart is. It is a reactor of your body. Your body is reacting to everything that you do, everything that you see through perception, everything that you hear. Okay? That's what you all have to understand. Your body is all formations of that. And what are you coming back to in set line connection in your settings, to your LCRs? Your fifth element. 4-track lines of highest interference in earth, water, air, and fire. It's going to take you out of the double helix into a triple crown. This is a triple bypass. Now, we already know what that is in moderation locations when it comes into your heart line connections, right? So it's all about tri-lines of communication setting and going past that line connections of its dimensional lines of space. There's how to use the modifications of consoles or anything calculations when you are in retract locations of recharging. What is the formations of recharging? Memory. Okay. Memory of you. Memory of everything that you've done in setting. Everything that you're seeing in setting. Everything that you're touching is information and memory. Because everything around you is already in its awareness. Everything around you is already in its consciousness. Everything around you is already in its intelligence of its operation. Everything around you is already in its existing, not its existence. It knows its existence, but it's existing now in your universal realm. Okay. Now, the process position travel lines, direct signals comes into data users and travel. Okay. Into process communications. This gets the team ready to understand how to use the data users of their self first. So in family circles and set locations and specification, the team will set the calculations to their line connections when it comes into classifications A. Okay. Now, position line calculation setting to its awareness of your family puts you in a rotation spin of clock locations, putting track lines and high division locations back in chronological order. So you work with your family cycles first, and then you work with the species. Correlations of track lines and high center interference in all line communication setting put all lines in a high position of files back in track location. All through settings. Okay. All right. So in that symbolism, correlations of track lines and high position of its calculations, getting direct lines of communication. Right. All center line calculation lines, infinity 8 in line calculation settings. Right. But position lines of track lines and high center interference in set locations, species. Infinity 8 at 3 settings. Okay. Time signatures, streams, and infinity lines, history, and locations of adaptations. Center correlation settings of track lines in all calculation modifications, stream interference, and travel. All through identification. Okay. Now the core track lines in the high center locations in the team line centers is going to be doing with line connections in position of all levels of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 locations of 8s. Setting calculation high position all levels of timestamp times sequence times pi. Correlation of track lines and high center interference and travel in position of its operations applications. All right, so infinity line screen height interference, put position location in your settings and foundation graph calculations. That's modulates your settings and travel. Okay, puts line calculation of 0 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in set locations, right? Spacing line to be working with 0, 1, 2, and 3 in set location. Okay. Each one has that alpha line, tone line connections. Setting track lines, high positions, operation. Spacing line, team. Okay, track location, incentives, high position calculations. So 0 line rotation, 0.1, and you get 0, 1 in travel. Point lines of track, calculation line, interference, and track locations. 1 equals lines of 8, 2 equals lines of 8, 3 equals lines of 8, and line connection at all levels. Setting travel in position use calculation line system. Position line centers, or track locations of 8s, right? Panel communication lines and high center interference and travel communication point centers. 1, 2, 3, and 4 set locations. The travel. The position line centers 0.1 is 8, 1 point line center is 8, 2 point line is 8, 3 it's 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and line settings is line calculation line center interference coming to throw pattern communication line center 6 over pi correlates the setting calculation line system and 8 tractions. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 track lines equals lines of 8. Okay, that's what the team need to be working with, right? 7 infinity line screens on infinity 8 line circles and high calculation stream interference. The calculation spacing line will be dealing with 3 lines. So the LCRs in set line condition, your left and your right hemispheres are going to be the core track location and center calculation every cerebros. Calculation lines and location grids. Direct location lines, center steering energy domes. Center calculation lines of travel and direct signal into modification line screens and high calculation line systems of portal communication and travel calculations. Directing modifications of platforms, okay, in settings. Okay, so the connections outline the spacing line is going to go into formation line screen interference. Setting correlations of tracks into an image. Process line calculation line system. Puts position line centers and travel calculations here. Thoughts. Sets communication in placebo cortex lines, division line condition, mystical cortex stream location of travel. Setting calculation operation. Directing lines of security line measures and travel calculations of travels. modification line screens, direct modifications, all levels of communication and setting. Okay, all through identification. Okay. See how they're all in different line signals and applications? They move their track settings. They're all in different platforms, right? But they're all on the same line universe location, right? So in position line calculation setting, that's where it comes position location of binaries. Same location, transistors on, transistors off, transistors on, transistors off, transistors on. Okay? On, off, right? So what this is going to do is going to set up provision lines of 6 lines of travel coordination settings of 8 line centers, height, interference, and throw pattern communication setting. They know exactly how to set up your binary correlate and calculation of cortex line and calculation setting to accommodate line interference into your computer frame position, location, of voice and grids. You have to understand how you speak is the computer, it's memory. So it's a 6 line throw pattern. That's why Gypsy's throat is position of graph calculations. Direct lines of stargates and star portals and star maps and star sequence and star calculation and interference is where you understand the realms and calculation, stream interference and travel. Direct modification, strain interference and travel calculation point system and travel calculations. Okay. All right. So species is going to be working with that line communication setting from 0, position 1 and 2 and 3. Okay. Sets calculation of 0 lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 in set locations. Okay, so that's 4 on provision and center calculations, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 line settings, right? So puts position line centers and travel calculation line system in setting. Okay, so 7 hemispheres, 7 equals hemisphere, and set lines of calculation line interference, sets position location line center interference, location calculations. So that's 7 line screens, direct calculation line interference, deviate line center height interference of 4 equals lines of 3 in track location. Okay, so in that lines comes into line connections, into colossal communications, into the galaxy line, shift line screen locations of the eye windows of the soul. Now, direct and modification line screens sets lines of communication settings in a 3-track location. Modulation line interference sets lines calculation in 1 lines, 2 lines, 3 lines, 4, 5, 6, and 7 set locations. Setting travel calculation point centers, right? 2 panels communication lines, setting in position location of graphs. Direct modification lines, high centered lines as circles. Setting communication of crop circles, set design. Setting communication line centers, height interference. 4, 3 sets line communication center and solar attractions. Thought provisions in line connection to its images of its algorithm and set location of travel and set position. Calculate modification setting and travel calculations. All calculate modified. Okay, traction. All right. So that's with the team calculations. Directing modification years through cortex lines of design. The center coordination setting is a 4-track line provision, 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, they're working with a line calculation setting into all levels. 3 equals lines is a hemisphere line connections, 3 hemispheres. So you're both working with LCRs. Okay, LCR. Okay. So left and right core equals cerebro. Okay. All right. So it's an LCR reading. So you're on moderations and moderators and calculations, your settings. Monitoring your graphs, your human residence, your core track locations, your images line screen. Oh, do you see that? You see that solar graph? There's a box line rotation. It illuminates the graph application line system. You see my computer frame is all pixelation now. You see the snowy graph? It's all pixelated. Right? So understand the pixelation lines, screen lines, understand your holographic location, your system adaptation. Clocking line centers of travels, directing modification cycles and high calculation position of point centers. So we take position on the clock lines in settings in a 3-track location. Okay? Direct lines modification into your flywheels, travel calculations, right? Point lines of tracks. But you guys are going to be in position of atom retraction in a 5-line connection. Okay? Direct modification of triangulation resets of all line center location and flux capacitor. 0 gravity line seek. Oh, now there's solid graph calculations. Setting travel communication. Okay? Direct modification lines and triangulation line centered location of space. setting modulation, line set location, your system. Equal line correlation setting, in, position, and travel. Point lines at set locations. 3 provision line cycles in set location. Okay. Direct modification lines, timestamps, times pi, times calculations, times calculations. Direct calculation lines in all calculation moderations. Now the constant correlation in track lines puts provision line centers in all calculation setting to your Merkabah, tesseract, and tetrahedron. That's that design. The modification line centers comes into the torcal fields. Now this gets really interesting in track location, your settings and calculation. Modulates the center of the correlation lines in a high interference, puts all levels of communication line screens as center in position to its operation. Direct modification centers and calculation. Okay, very complicated stuff. But if you look really close, you can actually see the 6 and you can see the 9. See, 6 and 9 is right there, right? So the balance screen line calculation line, spacing line, is going to be the 69 provision. Now that's 0 graph line calculation line setting in position location into bioptic screens. Bioptic line equals lines of screen location. Correlation setting, Brownian sphere. Sets calculation high interference, high calculation line spectrums and calculations, all speculations and set locations, star gates, star maps, star panels, and star location line system. Set location line system, species. Specification screen lines into image and travel calculation point centers. Brownian sphere line interference, Brownian sphere line coordinate track lines into neurologs. Line setting high interference. A neurolog calculation line center location of the loft. Loft correlation to graph calculation of point centers, and calculation of graph calculation stream interference of point tracks, the highest interference, position of travel, position of force locations. Now, directing lines of communication setting is where you understand that position location of your system is center calculations. Center units, center programs, direct signals, modification line calculation setting and position. Okay, set location setting, species, team. Okay, all right. So the bioptic center line interference is line calculation center. So you take the LCRs, set locations equals lines of reading, sets calculation line interference, and travel calculation lines of thoughts, equals lines of image, equals lines of AI, track location lines CPU, sets location of core, equals lines of cerebral, and set locations. Direct modification lines of highest interference. It's a reading cycle calculation line system. Travel calculation line centers are 3-point lines of tracks, 2 provisions, and line calculations and settings. So you got R line rotations into 1, 2, and 3 line connections. Now equal line calculation setting comes into point tracks of clocking. So we turn these into atom line settings to travel. Calculation lines of 3, sets lines of 2, sets lines of 3, and set lines of 4. Okay, so we provision the cycles. We take the 4 lines of setting, 4 calculation to 3 line communications, 4 lines of equals lines of 7, and rotation surface. Now my equation. All right. The center core line connections to the bioptic screen lines, direct line location position, is how you come into the line settings location geographic calculation streams. You guys work with the zeros, right? You work with the letters, right? And now we're going to work with the shapes. Okay. Oscillation levels of triangulation. Oscillation levels of triangulation. All right. So in that calculation, what is an oscillation? Okay. What is a level? Okay. And what is a triangulation? Triangulation. It's a picture, right? Right. Everybody knows what trigonometry is, right? What does trigonometry mean? Trigonometry. Trigonometry. What is that? Solar pegs. Setting graph calculation line, high calculation line, settings and travel position location, graph calculation, screen location, adaptation. Directing modification lines, high center interference, astral projection to your travel lines, film strips, positions over pi, and track line conditions. Solar pegs, solar division, solar calculation, stream interference, right? So trigonometry is basically understanding the set lines calculation, position modification line interference, which is triggers. Trigonometry, trigger. Bet you didn't know that. So inline center high interference, you need a trig to understand the calculations too with modification. Changes lines of coordination setting to travels, puts position lines of operation setting to your coordination setting to your image. So trigonometry is a huge part when it comes into the image graph calculation lines, into image screen interference, adaptation graph calculation lines, chronological order line screen interference, and travel position of data offset location. Travel position line centers and travel communication of 3 settings. Modifications of 2, 3, 4, and 5 set location of data files. All right. Modification line centers comes into trigonometry. Okay. Comes into trigonometry. Okay. Comes into trigonometry, which is a trigger. Okay. So in that lines, it opens up panels. It opens up graph calculation, streamlines of height adaptation. Okay. Steady course line channels, line centers, L line rotation, sets communication lines and graph calculation line streams. Modulates the screen interference into center correlation and travel, into dimension line screen lines and adaptation surface, and center coordinates and setting and travel position to its operation. Okay. So now you know what trigonometry is. We got into quasars, we got into factors over pi. Now you understand what trigonometry is. It's a trigger. It's kind of like a trigger, you know. Getting position line centers high calculation to a point center opens all track location in your settings. So in position locations, we have the high calculation line centers, telepathy and communication to its image location to its AI line calculation is CPU. CPU location is core equals location is cerebral. Supercortex lines is 0, 1, position track lines. 3, communication equals lines of hemisphere at its location. Okay. All right. Getting in a track line communication setting at all levels is open sequence, right? So you have a perception how you see things. Everybody has a different DNA, but you're always going to see different. If you want to see the same thing, you have to be at their frequency in rotation spin cycles. Now, when we get into the oscillation is an oscillator, the calculation of line center. Oscillator is location negative. Accelerator is the locations of positive. Okay. So get that calculation. You got particle equals location of acceleration. Set locations into line centers to oscillation. Okay. So it's all lines of how you come into your line calculation, yin and yang, how to process the positives and negatives to everything locations, right? Now the positives and negatives disappear, but they're still there in track locations. The mind adaptates its surface and understands the triangulation reset position of its programs. So when you come into line calculations all levels of your anagrams or any calculation to its image, what you are creating is a binary through your voice pattern, right? A binary through a voice, binary, pattern, binary, okay? So binary, singularity, binary, singularity, okay? Binary, oh, we got a position of 4 patterns, okay? And we got a triangulation set line connections, okay? So getting your position to understand how to use your computer read line settings, you have to identify yourself through your own GOD, a modification. This puts you in a mind and navigation line centers of balance, okay? All right, so once you get in that correlations of track lines, we're gonna get into line connection and algorithm, setting location line system, position condition operation. So we got them into 0, let's go into E, and let's go into box, okay? Remember, you're creating an algorithm, you're creating a film strip, okay? Your connections of your life is a connecting line setting. So it's understanding the transistors that go on and off, sets its binary to its capacity, sets lines of decoder to coder to codex. It's no difference than getting position at defrag and fragmentation, okay? There's no difference in position when you come into all line centers of direct and redirect. Re-advise, advise, okay? Recalculate, calculate, right? So you're going direct and redirect. That's all it is, direct and redirect, which is retraction of binary, okay? So it's kind of like taking the 0s and 1s and turning them into shapes, or taking the 0s and 1s and turning them into letters or symbols or numbers. That's retraction of binary, okay? So that's what your voice line does, but you don't realize that. You have to understand the voicing text that comes into the line connection is a reiteration line screen in position of the psychological connection that resets position of its tone. Okay, moderations of tone, alpha tone, delta tone, theta tone, omega tone, See the difference between all of them? Okay, it's all through frequency, right? It's all through oscillation. It's all through graph, right? It's all through positive. It's all through negative. Now that's where you guys are at, because that's just structure. There's no positive, there's no negative in anything, because if there is, you're adding an equation to what? Its location of its question. There's no question of anything. There's no positive, there's negative, it just is. Right? Because you have nothing to question about. But as soon as you add it to an equation, you're adding percentage over pi. So you could be at, let's say, 80%, or 80% location, right? So that's 20, okay, over pi. Okay, so that's 20%. That 20% can take over the 80%. All right, so it sets lines another 20% line conditions, brings it down to what? 60%. Okay, another 20% brings it down to 40%. All right, so you got 60% lines of getting capacity to get back in position of balance, or you're over factoring your pi position of travel lines and have to set a default position of capacity, position to calculation line settings, retrack location of provision line cycles into a binary relocation setting to travel. All through track locations, a percentage, right? So in all track line connection, high center interference, this is what you want to be in all track locations, 100% with 0 in set location. 100%, right? Which there's no positive and there's no negative. It just is. So it has a continuous flow of yin and yang. See? Boom. That's it. That's what you got to reach. Now, in your 100% goes in a million percent, 1,000%, billion%, trillion%, quadruple percent. Anything in calculation line interference, it's the percentage of you, how you see yourself in your mind adaptation of travel. Okay? All through percentage. All right? And that's calculated and modified when you come to your organ location setting. So what you're doing is you're creating an inventory, a structure, a design. Okay? That's a primer. Okay? So it's knowing how to put this all together. If you get a track line condition settings in position to a shape like this in set application, Stargate, right? Setting track calculation of point lines of tracks, direct modification lines of 3 settings and set locations, right? Direct modifications in an inline cycle sets communication to its program location setting. Okay, now you set lines of adaptation, set lines of adaptation, set lines of adaptation, set lines of adaptation. Okay, now the center correlation setting and position travel calculation and point system doesn't have a positive and negative. It just rotates and spins. So it goes in the same traction, same direction, just goes, faster, 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 faster in set location. So it's constantly going in line calculation setting of yin and yang of process calculation. All the time, all the time, all the time. Because if not, you're in percentage now. Which means you won't be going faster. Which means you're stagnatic. You're in a glitch. You're in separation. Okay? So you won't be able to get into manifestation. All right? So it's important you understand that through track line connections. Okay? Track line connections. See how it comes in correlation setting, the position of balance. Balance. And it creates this triangulation in line setting locations. Okay? All right, so, when you get into that program, the position location of your centers gets you in a better algorithm. So in that line calculation setting, look at yourself as a film strip. Okay? Now, what do you see in 2 track locations? TT, right? What else do you see? 2 H's, right? H here, T here, and T here, right? So you got T, T, H, H. Okay? All through that. All right? So there's all different ways. And then you want to understand the point centers of track location and clockings, 24, 48, 72. 24, 48, 72. Now, it doesn't need to be 24, 48, 72. in position locations. I can go for 144, 1044, and 2044. That's how fast I'm going. How fast are you going? Right? Through clocking, right? So you can go from 48, you can go into 72, and you can go into 144. You don't need to be in 24 because you're already in balance, a setting. Okay, so that is retraction of binary. Okay, understanding direct and redirect. Okay, that's what you guys have to get. It's like a windshield wiper. So it's just trying to understand what it's doing, right? Is it going this way or going that way? Going this way, going that way. Clockwise, counterclockwise. Clockwise, counterclockwise. Okay, that's all it is. So in provision, once you come into your film strips, it gets a lot more easier to create it through an algorithm. Once you create it through an algorithm, it comes into modifications like this line conditions. Triangulation line conditions, get into initiation, go to this line center, EXE, locations, run program. Okay. Now this is a calculation setting to a binary. This is a binary, and this is a binary. Okay. So getting into that line connection is knowing exactly how a computer does its memory. All through zero track line, a percentage of a triangulation line connection line sends two waves, set line combination lines to initiate, execute locations, and indicate positions, equal line correlates, setting, run program. Runs its program. What is it running? Well, it's running what it is, the modification line settings. Everything is traveling. E is traveling in positional line connection lines of 6, equals lines of 6. Okay? That's how a computer comes in its memory. It travels through letters and numbers and shapes and symbols, guys. Okay? Symbols are different because they never travel in one direction. They're always all over the place. It's creating data. It's creating a foundation graph. It's creating a network system for your system inside calculation setting so you understand how to use this in all formations when you're traveling through navigation of the mind. Okay? All right, so in that calculation line and positions, it's really fascinating when you understand that. Okay, and then you come into X. Now X lines travels lines of 4, equals lines of 4, right? Set position location E. It's calculation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? So what is that correlation of? 6 connections of 4 and 6. Binary 6, 4, 6. Okay. Through your settings and set locations. Okay. All right. So you take 6, 4, 6. 6, 4, 6 in its binary. Okay. Now, in that set line calculation setting, you're going to add a triangulation. All right. So what is the triangulation lines? 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. But see, it doesn't have to be 1, 2, and 3. It all depends on where you are in the mind navigation location of your system and travel. 3 transistors. You have to understand your transistors that go on. You have to understand your transistors that go off. So you have to understand. You start it off, you're in retraction binary. You're in binary in position when it goes on. Off is retraction. So you got to direct back. Okay? So these are the things you have to understand. When you turn on a light switch, what happens in track locations when you go really, really fast? It changes the settings, right? There you go. So 1, 2, and 3, right? Okay, so we have 6, 4, 6. Okay, and you got position line centers of 1, 2, and 3 interactions. Okay, say correctly. Setting, there's the binary right there. Now, all this is going to be an image. All this is going to be images. Okay, 6 line, throat. Whoa. 4 line, solar generator. Whoa. 6 line, throat. Whoa. Calculation line interference. 1 line, grounds. Whoa. 2 is security. Set locations. And 3 is the Fibonacci. See, all 3 image. Okay. So every time you're speaking, it's going to be an image through coordinate line settings, longitude, latitude, screen interference. Screen location setting really understands the position to your system and set locations. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of like algebra. Algebra is just a round off. You know, you're rounding it to, you know. So this is what it is, you know. So there's all ways of looking at yourself through a map, okay, of equation. Map, okay. And you can reiterate location setting and travel communication setting to this in satellite conditions because you know what it really is in travel. Okay, mind, adaptation, theta, okay, into its hemisphere. Break it down, what it is to you. That correlates you and gets you guys that interference once you reiterate the word and you turn it into what? Frequency. 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 You turn it into frequency. Okay? So that's how you guys have to come into that setting. This is a alliteration setting location in your system. This structures your division line conditions, how to see yourself through images, through your primer. All right? So get it in a box frame and set line condition side centers of travel. 3 travel locations. Set lines in all line communication. All right? Direct lines of communication line system. Position lines calculations. Graph calculations, screen lines. Position lines of traction. Okay? Sets lines of communication in all setting. Position line calculation line interference into your Earth set location. Modification line screen high interference into all levels of center correlation setting of traction. Okay? And calculation security and defense line screen. Open all signal line connection to your flywheel and track location. Direct modification line setting high interference in your Merkaba tesseract and tetrahedron and set calculation lines of intelligent frame position locations in position line calculation line setting of face recognition. All right. So it's so much fun when you just really understanding how to use this through equation through a line connections to your setting of computer, how it comes into its own binary, how the binary comes into letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols, and how it's coordinating longitude and latitude and creating its image in position of its travel into line connections of clocking. Okay, so every time you speak, your binary is picking up the vibration and it's creating its image. Okay, that's what it is in tractions. Now this is all done through all correlating high interference of your LCRs, which is a reading cycle. Setting correlation setting track line is your correlation setting connection to your system into your E-graph location settings. Modification lines of screens or direct signal modification interference is really understanding how to see yourself through perception. Okay? Perception equals 24. 24 equals perception. Direct and redirect. 0 to 5. Okay? Direct in settings, 5 to 0. Redirect. Direct, redirect. Okay? So when you count how the correlation setting comes into retraction of binary, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 0. Right? So you have to go do-do-do, 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 do-do. So I'm doing it really fast, but I'm going direct and redirect really quick. Do-do-do, 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 right? Now I went higher. Oh, birds reaching their frequency. So when you go higher, it's direct signal. It's already in omega. It knows I'm hitting omega, but it's at delta, right? So you have to understand how to direct and redirect in your setting location, your zeros, your letters, your numbers, and your shapes, okay? So what you're doing is you're creating in set locations. And I pause. I paused. Whoa, look at that. It's resetting location. Get in position, track lines, high center position, operate location system, back in setting. Oh. Now it's going white. Oh boy. Hey, are we on still line connections? The screen is line connections. And the time's going. This allocation. Whoa. Let's see what's happening here. All right. Time's still going. It's locked in frame. So what happens when you communicate to lines of direct and redirect, you know? Hey, are we back in settings?